They had done it, after so many years of terrifying retaliations. The Nazis' actions were put to rest on May of 1945, thanks to the Allied forces. It was a long fight with too many human lives lost. It was a great relief to finally have some sort of peace of mind for a change.
While Europe was celebrating the release of the harsh Nazi grasp, Americans and their allies would go to secure the victory after announcing Japan's surrender and the dismantling of the Axis powers. Russia had been with the Allies too, but the celebration was cut short. Russia was in the war longer than America, and America takes the credit for the war's ending. Russia saw the end of the war as an opportunity to spread their communist ideals across Eastern Europe, and hopefully for them, the rest of the world.
This slow but noticeable reach for Europe was not taken lightly by America, and with the US growing an even more powerful military than before the war, something was bound to go down between the two superpowers of the world.
Can these two countries settle the dispute calmly, or will the attempts at diplomacy send this Cold War into an explosive one? Let's observe this dispute from a safe distance, shall we? American officials analyzed the situation and took a defensive route that they called containment, where they would help groups of people that were actively taking stands against the communists in their countries, but not directly going for Russia's throat.
And with this strategy in mind, they began developing massive amounts of weapons and equipment that they would need to use when they would go on to help these commie-fighting countries, along with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, that served as a resisting force to lead the rejecting of Soviet presence in Europe.
Then, in 1949, out of the blue, the Russians test an atomic bomb that they themselves developed, which shocked everyone else because at this point in history, the Americans were the only country recognized to have atomic weapons.
Truman took note of this and saw the need to make sure America had the higher firepower, and greenlit the notion to create even more destructive atom bombs, including the infamous hydrogen bomb. With this, started the arms race between the two countries, a battle of intimidation. And that's just what was happening in the background. In the foreground is the Korean War that began in 1950, which was the true beginning of the splitting process of Korea.
Russia and American forces were involved in the war, as the Soviets supported the communist North Koreans in spreading communism to their south, as the North Koreans invaded South Korea, which just so happened to be close allies with America.
With the ending of the Korean War in 1953 came the death of Joseph Stalin, who was the dictator of the Soviet Union and of Russia as a whole, which led to the 4 years where the Cold War was at its coldest.
And when Russia was ready to put themselves back into the game, both Russia and America went straight back to racing, as with 1958 both countries began developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, which Russia will quietly install on the islands of the communist-controlled Cuba, which will prove to be the beginning of the Cold War's hottest moment.
On October 14, 1962, an American U-2 spy plane flying over Cuba spotted a Soviet ballistic missile being assembled for installation. Being 90 miles away from an American coastline and having been installed during the Cold War, Americans began to freak out on this new possibility of nuclear war after President Kennedy spoke about it to the people on the 22nd.
The Russian leader at this time, Nikita Khrushchev, felt that placing missiles on Cuba would be a means of leveling the playing field, as they had nuclear weapons pointed at them from Western Europe and Turkey.
An American blockade was set up around Cuba to stop the delivery of any more missiles, but on October 27th, an American reconnaissance plane was shot down, and this called for the reading of an invasion on Cuba.
Before the forces were told to move in, Khrushchev gave Kennedy an offer.
Khrushchev told Kennedy that he would remove the Cuban missiles if America didn't go forth with the invasion. He then sent him another message saying they would dismantle the missiles if America dismantled theirs in Turkey.
Kennedy went through with the first offer, but also privately uninstalled the missiles in Turkey.
The missile crisis was settled through great acts of diplomacy, but the way it ended will lead the Soviet Union to increase the size of their ballistic missiles on Russian territory, meaning it all wasn't over for the Cold War just yet.
We are now in the 1970s and the Cold War is still going. Current President Nixon is making headway in helping calm the situation down. Nixon and the Soviet Premier Brezhnev worked out the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, known as the SALT I.
This treaty banned manufacturing nuclear weapons on both sides to help with the looming threat of nuclear war.
As Reagan took the spot of the President of the United States, he returned to the fight against communism, fighting for freedom in the communistic parts of Central America. For Russia and the Soviet Union, Gorbachev took office and took steps to remove totalitarian aspects of the Soviet Union, as the Union was slowly collapsing, but in a good way.
On June 12, 1987, Reagan made an amazing speech outside the Berlin Wall, one of the visible symbols of the communist regime and Cold War.
We hear much from Moscow about a new policy of reform and openness. Some political prisoners have been released. Certain foreign news broadcasts are no longer being jammed. Some economic enterprises have been permitted to operate with greater freedom from state control. Are these the beginnings of profound changes in the Soviet state, or are they token gestures intended to raise false hopes in the West or to strengthen the Soviet system without it? We welcome change and openness, for we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In November of 1989, the wall came down.
That same year, all of the parts of Europe under communist control began to resurrect non-communist forms of government, with help from NATO, with no retaliation from Gorbachev, only approval.
In late 1991, the Soviet Union had officially collapsed and turned from its communist ways, embracing a democratic government.
And with that, after 45 years, the Cold War had come to a close.
And with the genius diplomatic decisions, America and the Soviet Union were able to work things out and just barely avoided total nuclear annihilation.